Happy New Year. Before we start tonight's program, this is a reminder that this episode will address various topics related to addiction, mental health, and a reminder about multiple sclerosis. These may be sensitive to some of our viewers. Viewer discretion, as always, is advised. We remind you to please consult your doctor, your mental health professional, your outreach group, your sponsor, or specialist before adopting any change to your dietary, physical, and/or mental health regime. If you're looking for options with respect to mental health, contact SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, at 1-800-662-HELP. It's 1-800-662-4357. The service is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and is a confidential free information service for individuals and family members facing such stressors. Importantly, if you're feeling suicidal crisis or emotional distress and need to be put in touch with a crisis center, call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. Or go to suicidepreventionlifeline.org. You can also text the word HOME to 741-741. Those resources are also available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And something that we've been talking about now for about a year, but moreover, it's been something that has been affecting my life for the last 11 years by that of demyelination, diagnosed with multiple sclerosis for about a year. The National MS Society is a collective of passionate individuals who want to do something about MS now, to move together towards a world free of multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis is comprised of unpredictable and often disabling flare-ups of the central nervous system. Such flare-ups disrupt the flow of information within the brain and between the brain and the body. The National MS Society is the largest private funder of MS researchers in the world, investing more than $1 billion to date. MS stops people from moving, but the National MS Society exists to make sure that MS doesn't. To contact the National MS Society, please call 1-800-344-4867. Again, 1-800-344-4867. Or go to the website at nationalmssociety.org. Thank you to all of you who have donated money to this amazing organization, or even gone to the National MS Society to learn more about demyelination and multiple sclerosis. It touches me and over the 1 million people in this country who have multiple sclerosis in so many ways, and I appreciate all of you. And on that, let's begin. Season 4, and we still have a story to tell, but there are a lot of things we have to plan this year. Not only for the season, but the things I want to try to achieve this year. Lots of things. But let's also talk about the things you want to achieve this year. Let's make this a workshop, because this is a venture into a new year, and this is the venture forward. Good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you may be, and welcome to the Venture Forward. I am John Venturini, a recovering addict of overeating, obesity, compulsive gambling, and alcoholism. And it's an honor and pleasure to see all of you tonight on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch for this beginning of Season 4 of the Venture Forward. If you haven't seen our program before, it is basically a story of the addictions that have held me back in my life and the ongoing process to overcome these addictions, but also a continuing study of the mind and ourselves as we go forward. Because we learn from the past, but we should never dwell upon the past, and we should always move forward. And it's an honor and pleasure to see all of you tonight on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Happy New Year once again. If I seem a bit off this evening, I got the booster, so I might be off a step or two. So I apologize in advance, but it's good to see all of you. Let's see who wins the door prize tonight on YouTube, and that would go to Saren, who says hi. Good evening to you, Saren. Hope you're doing well. Also on YouTube, we have Rich, who says, hey, guys. Rich, hope you're doing well. Great show on Sunday, by the way. Sarah, hi, all. I say hi to you, Sarah. Hope you're doing well this Tuesday evening. And also on YouTube, we have Laura. Laura, who says hello. Hello, Laura. Hope you're doing well. If I haven't said this before an episode in the past, I don't know how many times I haven't said this, but it's been a story, hasn't it? We've talked about a lot on this show. And I think when I think about Season 4 and what this next body of work is going to be, probably January to June, maybe January to July, we'll see how it works. We're going to talk about the issues and concepts we talked about before, but we're going to take it one step further. I think when trying to talk about this journey, talk about how these concepts basically affected me in my life, I can always talk about it from one person's perspective. And I try to bring on as many guests as I can to tell it from their perspective as well. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go down one or two more layers and talk about the things that may have caused those addictions in the first place. We're going to talk more about the mind, but moreover, we're going to talk about how we deal with others. That sort of interpersonal relationship, but moreover, how do we gather and garner that love, respect, and honesty for ourselves so we can share it to whomever and whenever and who and wherever, right? For any and all, as I say. That's going to be an important concept in this season. Now, obviously, things are dynamically changing in this world. And as those things pop up, we will talk about that too. And we are going to talk about my ongoing story with multiple sclerosis. I go for my next infusion of Oservis in April. And that in itself will be an episode because we have to talk about that, but we also have to talk about the National MS Society a bit more because they have provided such an amazing resource to me and over to 1 million people in this country who have multiple sclerosis. So we'll shed some light on that. We'll talk about the MS Walk in May, and that basically, in a nutshell, is the concepts for Season 4, but things will be added and things will be changed as needed, as this is an ongoing, living, breathing show, as we are all ongoing, living, breathing people. And as Sarah says, yes, the roots. We're going to talk about the roots. Absolutely. So that said, let's get at it for a bit. This is a venture into a new year. In this year of 2022, we've been doing this show since October of 2020, where the road was already starting to be walked down. As I realized in 2019, I had a severe problem with obesity. I had a severe problem with alcoholism, and I definitely have a story to tell. And this story keeps on evolving, as regular viewers of the show have well known. But as new viewers are quick to say, wow, we've gone through a lot. We have. And that's not the end of it. We should be quick and agile and strong enough to handle whatever is thrown our way. If our foundation is solid, as we said before, the roots, if the roots are solid, we can handle a lot. And we'll talk about that too in season 4. But tonight's show, Happy New Year once again. Hope you're having a good beginning to your 2022. We're going to talk about the story thus far. We'll revisit some of the key numbers, some of the key things that have been part of this story since the get-go. We'll talk about some personal goals and conquests because that has some relation to the topics for season 4 and how those two ideas will be married together. And then, as always, we will take your questions and comments. What have we tackled thus far? I was going to say thus and tackled at the same time. What have we tackled thus far? We talked about overeating, obesity. We talked about alcoholism. We talked about compulsive gambling. We talked about gaming addiction. We talked about codependency and co-addiction. We talked about therapy and internal family systems. We talked about multiple sclerosis. We talked about life lessons. We talked about bankruptcy. We talked about bullying and interpersonal relationships. But in some of these boxes, if you will, I think we've talked about it at the surface. We're going to dig into it a bit more as the season goes through. But those kind of constructs are going to be very important. Before we continue, some comments. Sarah says, reading Brené Brown's new book, Atlas of the Heart, sounds like a perfect companion for season 4. Yeah, it definitely is. I think I'll be quoting a bit more from Language of Letting Go this season as well, especially since the workbook has become something that has been quickly jotted and earmarked and highlighted as much as I can say. More so than other books that I've owned in the last few years. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Brown. We'll talk about a lot of different books and a lot of different authors with respect to the mental, mind, physical body sort of construct as far as relationship and as far as taking care of ourselves. So I am looking forward to seeing what you get out of that. I might be reading that book with you for sure. Saren says it's all about roots. Definitely agree. Saren also says Brené Brown is someone I don't read enough of. Yeah, I think I'm definitely guilty of that too. I definitely need to pick up more on that too. Sarah says, I just finished pruning the roots of my orchids. They're healthier and grow better that way. Funny how nature makes itself known in many different forms. Sarah says, such a giant statement, Sarah. Before we continue, much thanks to all of you. Because there have been episodes that I've done of this show in the last year and change that have been hard. But with knowing how great this community is, it has absolutely helped me. So thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So we talked about what we've tackled thus far. I think the next point to this is, well, what are the big 3? We talk about the big 3. We show the big 3 on the whiteboard in a countdown of every episode. But let's talk about that for a second. 1,053 days of tracking food, 311 pounds down, weighing 169 as of this morning. 950 days sober, 632 days not gambling, and one number that I don't usually show in the countdown, 10 bankruptcy payments down, 50 to go. That became part of the story this year as well, or last year rather, in 2021. So these are numbers. These are numbers that are up on my board to remind me, but to motivate me. And I share these numbers on all the episodes just to show you that it is front of mind for me. Always has been, always will be. So those are the big numbers. Those are numbers that motivate for sure. Let's talk about the physical element for a second. And this is a slide I showed back in season 3. I'm going to show it again tonight. Why is that number of the 311 pounds and the 1,000+ days of tracking food, why is this important? Because physically, there were a lot of things wrong with me. They were definitely holding me back, and they were definitely near killing me. The fact that I couldn't walk more than 10 feet. The fact that I couldn't sleep at night. The fact that I had panic attacks. The fact that I was dealing with gout. The fact that I couldn't be satiated when I ate. Where as much as I was doing everything else, like there was no satiation point. To track your food, to realize there's a problem, and start working on the dynamics of it is a large process. But when you trust yourself and you trust the work of others, and you hold true to that, as we say, one foot in front of the other, one step at a time. It's definitely true here as well. A lot of amazing things happen. You turn into the guy that was on the guy that was on the left-hand side to the guy that's on the right-hand side. A guy who basically had a very unhealthy relationship with food, a very unhealthy relationship with alcohol. Just a very unhealthy life. And turned into a life that is a lot more healthier, a lot more sustainable, a lot more sound as far as physical, but also a lot more sound as far as mental, a lot more sound as far as emotional. Now, that said, with the multiple sclerosis, there are good days and there are bad days. We've talked about that before, and we'll probably talk about that a few more times this season as well. But I am definitely in a much better place now than I was 3 years ago, without question. So if this is a slide that I keep on gravitating to, I do, because this tells a story. The pictures of those that are on the left, one of me in a cigar shop, one of me sitting down in front of, I believe, I think it was an airport bench. But down the right-hand side, me going out to dinner and me just taking a picture of myself. It's a very changed person, but a person who has found a better path. A person who wants to share everything he's learned to all of you, to all who wants to listen. And we'll talk more about what I mean by that before the hour is over. Some comments. Sarah says she's also reading their Kolk's book, The Body Keeps a Score. Oh, great book. Great book. Hugely informative about trauma. Yeah. Body Keeps a Score is a great book. Glad you definitely mentioned it. Sarah also says, so amazing, John. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Sharon's absolutely right when she says Body Keeps a Score is a doozy. It is. It absolutely is. But it's definitely a worthwhile read. Sarah says, such an amazing change, John. Thank you. What is it like to look at the old pictures? Let's bring that back up for a second. And I'll tell you exactly what goes through my mind when I look at those pictures over there. I see someone on the left-hand side who wasn't happy unless he was drinking, eating, smoking a cigar, gambling, doing things that were putting him on a faster track to leave this earth sooner rather than later. Or at least put himself in a very bad world of hurt. A world that he couldn't barely manage to be in as is. When I see the pictures of those that are on the right-hand side, I see someone who has made some serious sacrifices. But when you think about it, they're not really sacrifices as much more as they are insurance policies to make sure that he lives the best life he can. Are the pictures on the left-hand side a mistake? No. No, because as I've told you before, every moment is indeed a gift. I think without those pictures, without sitting at a cigar shop, without having to sit in front on an airport bench or wherever I was sitting in that lower left-hand corner picture, I wouldn't have an appreciation for where I am right now. So to look at the old pictures and to know where I am now, I feel very, here's a word that's going to surprise you. Relieved. I feel relieved. Because if I kept on going down the road, one, I don't know if I'd be able to survive given the news that I got in the last year and change, the MS. But secondly, I don't know if I'd be able to survive given what we've been going through in this world in the last 2 years. So for multiple reasons, this was very, very well needed. And the timing was very, very almost perfect. But I don't think the timing is ever perfect, because if you remember, I also was dropping the weight twice before just to put it back on. My mind was never on straight to begin with. And because I had so many poor codependencies and co-addictions, the weight just came back on and then some. So if anyone ever comes to me and says, hey, John, how do you lose the weight? The first thing I always say is, it starts up here. You have to figure out why you're gravitating to it. You have to figure out, if you're a closet eater, why do you sit at a line at a drive-thru and order everything and everything, anything and everything rather. You have to think about why those habits and tendencies come to the precipice. You also have to think about what are the sort of emotional scars and other things that have popped up that cause you to either overeat or drink or what enter addiction here, right? There's always a rhyme and reason, also a precipitating cause, at least in our mind, that causes us to go for comfort. And if you think about the three that are on that list, gambling, overeating, alcoholism, it's definitely a comforting sort of thing. Now, I would say a false positive if you think about it, because what does gambling get you? It gets you into debt. What does alcohol get you? Well, it just gives you a worse sense of how your body's going to behave. And as far as overeating, well, eventually that catches up, whether it's a question of cholesterol or diabetes or obesity or whatnot. In the moment, it's pleasurable. In the moment, it may satisfy and provide said comfort. But past that, it doesn't do much of that. In fact, it causes much more of a hurt. It causes much more of a problem. So figuring out why we do those things in the first place is the first thing you can do when you go down that road. Outside of admitting that, hey, I have a overeating problem, or hey, I have an alcohol problem, or hey, I have whatever the addiction is problem. So it goes part and parcel for sure. Alcoholism and gambling, this is a slide I showed before as well, but I mean, again, same theme as before. There was a lack of satiation. There was a lack of satiation when I was drinking. There was a lack of satiation when I was gambling. There was overconsumption with both activities. And the thing about the drinking that not many people bring to the table is the fact that it causes metabolic or metabolism paralysis. And basically, your body has a hard time processing sugar and alcohol and whatnot. It throws everything askew. And then with respect to the gambling, it causes financial peril because, again, there's no off switch. You just keep on gambling, or you keep on hitting that video poker machine or whatnot. So these are things that are just as important as the pictures that were on the previous slide. Because I look at those pictures and I am reminded of what this was like. You know, you think about the highs of the situation, but then you think about the lows. You think about it that way. The pictures on the left are, as before, the pictures on the left were in the act, that big win. The pictures on the right talk about what they eventually caused. Bankruptcy. Or the need to pour every bottle of alcohol that was in the house down the drain. And as I kind of alluded to, we will go back down the roads as far as talking about the alcoholism and the obesity, or watching what we eat and physical activity, but then also the gambling. And funny enough, Thursday's episode is going to be about gambling again, because in the last month, I've seen way too many instances of people spending way too much time on something that doesn't cause much more than a slow dripping of disposable income, to the point where the disposable income becomes debt, and then becomes pressing debt, and then becomes a debt so large that you end up filing Chapter 13 or Chapter 7 for. We're going to talk more about that on Thursday. But can't forget about those things. So let's talk about the go forward, right? We talked about the past. Let's talk about the go forward. The conquests and goals I have for this year is working out. It's stuff that I've picked up in 2021 that I'm going to be definitely spending a lot more time doing. As far as the strength training, building endurance, that's very much part of the story, especially when I want to run, as I call to a couple of other people, the Grand Slam, in the sense that I want to run a 5K, a 10K, a half marathon, and a full marathon. In order to do that, I have to have endurance. So the time I spend in the gym, the time I spend working out, the time just getting to 10,000 steps every day, which is now 12,000 steps, but that's another story for another day, is very important. It's foundational. So that's definitely one of the conquests, is to continue that, right? The running is something that I have very, very dear people in this life that have held a very high bar for me in their love of running. They're sort of growing to that sort of just an incredible sort of activity, incredible sort of hobby, and what sort of physical gains it got them. I look at them with such inspiration, whether we're talking about my cousin or my dear friend from Raleigh or who have you. These people are very important, and I definitely want to take in that and just to show them that, hey, I've been listening, and hopefully I gain something out of this and I learn a thing or two about it. But truth be told, I hate to admit this, but I'm actually starting to like running. I would never imagine to say that in any sort of stretch of my life in the last 44 and a half years. Here I am saying it. I actually enjoy running. Go figure. I think it's because it's something where we can have that sort of, it could be very much a meditative state while you're doing something that is high cardio, but it's also something that you can do to test yourself, and you can always look for that sort of gain as far as the physical challenge of it. There's something so amazing about it. I'm just glad that I'm doing it, because given the fact that I spent most of this life morbidly obese, I get a chance to run now. Hey, sign me up. Now, that said, there are other things I want to do. We joked about this in Live Every Day in August back in 2020. I definitely want to go skydiving. I definitely want to go cliff diving. There are a couple other things on that list. When I have a body that can do that now and not at the poor shape I was in, basically the world's your oyster, right? You could take on anything you want to take on, anything that you're curious about doing, whether it's a large hike or climbing a mountain or whatnot. It's now possible. If there's a little bit of a issue as far as, what it's going to be for overheating, because that's something you worry about with multiple sclerosis, you take that into consideration. But there are a lot more things that are available to me now than they were in January of 2019. So, yes. The third item is something that some of you know about. This year, I'm finally finishing the book. I have enough words around the multiple sclerosis story to tie everything together, so I'm looking to get that done by the middle of the year. And as soon as I have some dates tied to that, I will talk more about it on the show, as well as I will talk about that with all of you. And then traveling. Traveling. I enjoyed the trip to Portland and Los Angeles last year, so much so that I definitely want to do more of that. There's a lot of this world that I want to see, a lot of this world that I haven't taken in for one reason or another. Now, outside of the fact that we've been dealing with something for the last 2 years, fully noted. But there's a lot of things in this earth that I want to take in, I want to be able to experience, I want to see. And if 2022 is going to be a continuation and a propelling of that, let's go for it. Let's absolutely go for it. So that's personally my conquests and goals. What does that mean for the show? Good question. before we do that, we have to talk about the adages that kind of give me this sort of motivation. And it's things that I've talked about before, but there's some new ones. So I think about the key four. And health, wealth, relationships, and higher purpose. We've always talked about health, wealth, and happiness. Relationships and higher purpose are definitely part of the happiness part of it, but I think that community is very important. People gravitate thinking that relationship automatically means that one-on-one interpersonal relationship. Not necessarily. Here, the relationship means the community that we build, the groups that we form. All of you. People that love to learn, people that have a vested interest to the show, have a vested interest in my story, but likewise, vice versa, right? We're forming a community, and that relationship is very important. When we talk about higher purpose, communicating this, sharing this with everybody, that's a higher purpose. The next point of this is departing our comfort zone, leaving faith in the universe. Basically trusting in the greatest orderly direction, knowing full well that magic happens outside of the zone. We have to risk a little bit. We have to be uncomfortable in order to get anywhere. It's very easy to forget that, but we're gonna talk about that a little bit this season too. Making the choice to improve yourself is just step one. There are a lot of times, especially I'm guilty of this, back in my 20s, where I would want to go down that road and went down that road. And either I got to the goal, but I just failed to maintain it for one reason or another. Or there are things I wanted to do that I never ended up doing because I was afraid. Making the choice to improve yourself, making the choice to go ahead and take on a conquest is just step one. Because the next part of that is we should never go backwards to the habits and situations that weren't helping our evolution. We always have to keep moving. That's how we move forward. If we get paralyzed at the thought of the future and we live in our fear and we retreat back just based on a fear that is not necessarily reality, we'll never get anywhere. We should always keep moving. Number 5 is always remind yourself why you stopped yourself from moving forward whilst keeping confidence and positivity about the future by being consistent for this change. I mean, you gotta remind yourself why you stopped in the past, but then reverse that in moving forward. You have to be confident. You have to be positive. Because this is a venture forward. And lastly, every moment is indeed a gift. Every moment. Let's talk about that for a second. Let's bring up the pictures before. You're looking at a guy smoking cigars at a cigar shop. That moment was an important moment for me. In the sense that maybe it got me a short-term sort of satisfaction, but it didn't get me much more than that. And the more I did it, and I'll tell you, when stress was really high, I was smoking a lot of cigars. It didn't get me far anywhere. It actually, I had a hard time moving around to begin with. 10 feet. When I was smoking cigars, it was more like 5 to 7 feet. So like when I was at nearly 500 pounds, that was the worst time I could be smoking cigars. Not that there's any good time to be smoking cigars, to be honest with you. Austin says, hey JV, Austin, hope you're doing well, my friend. So those are some important cornerstone adages here that are very important to this. So let's talk about some topics. Now, I said this was part of a workshop, so definitely if there are any thoughts that you have, I saw stuff about Brene Brown in the comments. Let's talk about how we can incorporate that. Also, codependency no more. Codependent no more is another topic I definitely want to formulate a show around as well. We're going to start off by talking about the three chief addictions. So gambling, we're going to revisit gambling on Thursday night. Just saw way too many places and things around me where it's like, wow, when you go through a pandemic, it's amazing how places like casinos and even your run-of-the-mill gaming halls and your run-of-the-mill slot rooms have just grown as far as the amount of intake, the amount of gross receipts that they get. Whereas you would think that there wouldn't be as many people going out, period, right? Especially with Omicron and whatnot. But that's the topic on Thursday. We'll revisit my story. But we're also going to talk about the incredible statistics that have come out in the last month about the percentage increase with gambling, both in the brick and mortar, but also in the online presence as well. Next Tuesday, or 2 Tuesdays from now, we're going to talk about overeating, because I think that is fresh in my mind as well, especially coming off the holidays. Also talking about the things that I was very well aware of during the holidays to try to keep myself in check. And then the following Tuesday, we'll talk about alcoholism again, because that's something I will never stop talking about between that and the overeating. Just so many people that were around me that took up those things and just double and tripled down on them. So we're going to talk about it. Next Tuesday, we're going to talk about triggering events. Things that cause us to do things that we should not be doing, or things that make us repel. Recognizing those triggering events, but also avoiding them. It's going to be a very interesting conversation, because there are events that are not so much on the precipice as far as them being triggers, but they have a grenade effect that later on it catches you off guard. So we're going to talk about triggering events 1 week from tonight. Coming up, we'll talk about how to escape our comfort zone freely, some sort of technique, some sort of mindset that allows us to do that. Sometime this season, we'll talk about finding our higher purpose. It's an ever-evolving story as far as what that higher purpose is, but not only that, there are many things that can encompass that higher purpose. And I definitely want to spend at least an episode talking about that. The fifth one would be love. Not only for the people we meet, but for ourselves. And as I've alluded to, our love starts inside, always. In order for us to love, I truly believe that we have to love ourselves. We have to have some strong sense of love inside, so we can share that to whomever, wherever, whenever. Akin to that would be relationships and finding what works. And figuring out what sort of relationships make sense for you. Because what makes sense for you may not be the same for someone else, right? So we'll talk about that. Going to the orange ribbon next, advancements with multiple sclerosis. We'll talk about my story more as far as the MS treatment. We'll talk more about Oservis when I go for my next infusion in April. We'll talk about the MS walk coming up in May. And then kind of an ask for you, but I'm doing my research here as well. More interviews on how to expand this story. If you have a story you want to tell and you want to share it on The Venture Forward, by all means, email me, theventureforward@gmail.com. Would love for you to tell your story, because you have an amazing group of people here that want to hear your story, that definitely care. We have built such a strong, caring community here. So if you have a story you want to tell, by all means, let us know about it. theventureforward@gmail.com. So that's kind of the straw man, the whiteboard, if you will, for this season coming up. But as I said before, things can change. And as you have ideas and I have ideas, we will tweak and tie this as we go forward. But it is absolutely a cathartic exercise and a half to do this show, to do this project, but also such a love to share this with all of you because you guys are incredible. I've met such amazing people in the last 2 years, and I am very thankful. I thought there was one more comment. There isn't. So I'll just say what I say at the end of every Venture Forward of VF Talks. Oh, well, I should say this first. Thursday night, once again, we revisit gambling. We'll talk about my story. We'll talk about the ongoing numbers with the increase in gambling over the last year or so, but especially in the last 90 days. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about my gambling story. That'll be Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. And then Friday night, we will do what we do every Friday night. We'll have another episode of VF Talks with Matt Haas, Paul Burke, and all of you. VF Talks airs on Friday nights at 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific. But until then, I'm going to say the same thing I say at the end of every Venture Forward of VF Talks. Stay safe, stay sane, stay strong, stay sober. You're worth it. Have a wonderful night, and I'll see you Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific for the next episode of the Venture Forward. Have a wonderful night. Fly be free.